Hey Skeeters, and welcome to our little segment today. We are going to be covering Teak 1A. So let's go ahead and dive in, see what this Teak is all about. Alright, so Teak 1A, this standard states, determine the meaning of grade level of technical academic English words in multiple content areas. For example, science, math, social studies, and the arts derive from Latin, Greek, or other linguistic roots and affixes. So this bottom part here, talking about deriving from different languages, English comes from a lot of different languages. So that's really all that's talking about, just root words and things like that. The main focus of this standard and what you really need to take away from this starts here where it says grade level. So there's going to be words that you should have learned as a kid. There's going to be words that you will learn as you grow older and more educated and just becoming an expert in a field. But what this standard is wanting to focus on is the knowing the words that you should know as freshmen in high school. Okay. The other important part of this standard is the fact that it wants you to be able to identify these grade level appropriate words, but not just in English, in science, math, social studies as well. Okay, so it's across all of your content core subject areas. So in a few less words than what the state gives us, okay, you need to be able to figure out the meaning of vocabulary in different subject areas that students in your same grade should be able to understand and know. So that's what this standard is all about. So just to give you a couple of examples, it does talk about needing to understand words across subject areas. And so I attempted to come up with a science example. So I'll just go ahead and play this video to start, and I'll discuss it in just a second.
Hi, I'm Ellen. Oh, and Elmo's Elmo. And we're here to tell you about a very important word. A word that everyone needs to know. Tell them what the word is. Okay, the word is healthy. Say it again. Healthy. One more time. Healthy. Now, the word healthy means taking good care of yourself, and there are lots of ways to keep your body healthy.
Yes, let's show them healthy, Miss Ellen.
Let's do it, Elmo.
Eating fruits and vegetables.
Ooh. That's healthy.
Very good. Washing your hands.
Good hygiene is very healthy.
Brushing your teeth.
That's very
Okay,
healthy.
so I think you get the point. Anytime, especially Sesame Street, shows anything about vocabulary, it's going to be things that kids need to learn or should be learning in school or things like that. And so this is the lower end extreme of this standard. So things that you already know. That's not what this standard is talking about. These are words that are lower level. This right here in this middle section, these are the grade appropriate words that you should be learning as a ninth grader in science. Things you should know, have already been exposed to, or things that you are able to figure out just because of things you're learning. And then we have this next extreme. So just kind of listen to this TED Talk for a couple of seconds and then listen to the words he's using.
Just over a year ago, for the third time in my life, I ceased to exist. I was having a small operation. My brain was filling with anesthetic. I remember a sense of detachment and falling apart, coldness. And then I was back, drowsy and disoriented, but definitely there. Now, when you wake from a deep sleep, you might feel confused about the time or anxious about oversleeping, but there's always a basic sense of time having passed, of a continuity between then and now. And coming around from anesthesia is very different. I could have been under for 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 years, or even 50 years. I simply wasn't there. It was total oblivion. Anesthesia, it's a modern kind of magic. It turns people into objects, and then we hope back again into people. And in this process is one of the greatest remaining mysteries in science and philosophy. How does consciousness happen? Somehow, within each of our brains, the combined activity of many billions of neurons, each one a tiny biological machine, is generating a conscious experience. And not just any conscious experience, your conscious experience right here and right now. How does this happen?
Okay, so this idea of like this study of the stream of consciousness, is a study that not a lot of people are involved in, first of all. But so you're not going to be familiar with a lot of the words. He used words like neurons and oblivion, biological machines, being disoriented, anesthesia. So if you're not really familiar with the subject area, you're not going to know those words. They're very high level, and it's just not that this standard is more focused on what you will be able to understand based on what you know. Okay, and so that we this is the science example of just like that lower extreme, what you should know or what you can figure out, and then what the higher extreme, which is, you know, just above what you've learned. So to give you an English example, things that you've already been exposed to in the content of English: noun, main idea, compound word. These are things that you should already know, or things that you have learned already. Okay. As we move forward, things that you should be learning now: grade appropriate English content, vocabulary, tone, thesis statement, passive voice. And then there's things past those words, those vocabulary words, that you aren't going to know because you haven't been exposed to them, and you're not going to be expected necessarily to learn them yet. Okay, so all about that grade level appropriate vocabulary across all your subjects. Okay, so now to give you a little idea of how this is tested or looked at. So we have an excerpt from American Apple. The question is, which word in paragraph 3 means given but not returned? So you're going to be asked to look at the different vocabulary words that are answer choices in the question, and either use context clues or a dictionary maybe to look them up and find out what the correct answer is, what word matches this definition. So the first thing I would always suggest to do is find the words in the paragraph, so that way you can kind of identify their meaning. Okay, so we have sorrow here, unrequited here, furtive, and savored, all right here in this paragraph. And so then once you've kind of identified where they are in the paragraph, then read the paragraph, and then figure out which one falls under this definition here in the question: given but not returned. Okay? So, in this city of ours, where people like to chase whatever is fashionable, many kinds of foreign apples flood in like mad, the most attention-catching of which are American apples. The arrival of American apples added to the sorrow in my heart. I felt like a young lad suffering from unrequited love, who, despite his burning desire, does not dare to do anything bolder than cast furtive glances at his beloved girl from a distance. For 1,000 times I had let my reporter's imagination run wild, and savored in my mind how sweet and fragrant American apples would taste, but I would not walk close to them. And just for time's sake, I'll stop reading there since we've gotten to all of our words. So then you just go back and you look and try to figure out what word matches the definition given in the question. So the arrival of American apples added to the sorrow in my heart. So then you keep reading. I felt like a young lad suffering. So when you see that word suffering, you kind of use your context clues that sorrow might be connected to suffering. And if that's the case, then given but not returned is not the definition of the word sorrow. So we'll come down here and mark out the word sorrow. I felt like a young lad suffering from unrequited love, who, despite his burning desire, does not dare to do anything bolder than cast furtive glances at his beloved girl from a distance. So really we have two words in that sentence. The word unrequited, we can kind of figure out based on this sentence here, this part: despite his burning desire, that he's trying to give something, despite his his burning desire, that even though has this desire and has this feeling, he doesn't dare act on it. Okay. And so if it's given, if he has this feeling, is it returned if he's not going to act on it? So unrequited can kind of be held on to. Then you have cast furtive glances at his beloved girl from a distance. Honestly, if you're just kind of looking at it, you would probably have to look up the word furtive just because the context here is unclear of what that would actually mean. But when we look up the word, it's not going to match. So furtive is not the correct answer. And then you come down here, it says savored. For 1,000 times I had let my reporter's imagination run wild and savored in my mind how sweet and fragrant American apples would taste. So savored, if you look here, just kind of talks about sweet and fragrant they would taste. So that's savoring a flavor or a taste. That is not the correct definition here. So the correct answer is B, unrequited. So hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of Standard 1A. Tune in next for the next standard as Standard 1B, and we empower, we impact, we love. We are Skeeter Nation.